Welcome then to Where's the Money Gone? I'd like to welcome to this podcast Tarnia Elsworth. Tarnia is chair of the Shrimp Supporters Trust at Morecambe, a football club who, as we record this, are in danger of going out of business. Now, there are some positive signs, as we'll discuss with Tarnia, but the club is under a transfer embargo. The start of its National League season has been placed under suspension. And there is still a very real threat that Morecambe FC will not be in business for the rest of this season. Tarnia, first, as a fellow football fan, my condolences. I don't think any supporter should have to go through this level of uncertainty. Those of us who live and breathe our football clubs know how important it is. This must have been and must still be a very worrying time for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for taking the time to speak to us about it. It's a horrendous time, and exactly like you say, it's horrendous, but we're not the only people going through this. It's football fans up and down the country are victims of the current situation in football. But yeah, for Morecambe, it's a really terrible time. And we appreciate your support, and the wider footballing family have shown us massive love and support as well, which is a good thing to come out of a bad thing.
Indeed. And I know from the existence of the trust, and I know from other clubs, that one way or another there will be a football club of some description in Morecambe going forward. And we'll talk about that. But just take me back. Where does this problem start for you? Because not too long ago, Morecambe were in League One. Always seen, I think, maybe as the nickname implies. I know it's a coastal town, but, they were shrimps in the world of professional football. But more power to the town and the football club for getting to the level that they did.
Yeah, and it was the COVID season that helped us really, where everything was equalised a little bit across the leagues, and spending power didn't really come into play. So we showed our grit and our determination that season, and we kind of showed, look, if it's a more level playing field, look what Morecambe can achieve. So yeah, in the last few seasons we've gone from League One to League Two to now the National League, and what's happened in a nutshell is Bond Group's stated when we're in League One that they wanted to sell the club, and that's put us in a period of uncertainty ever since. It's quite clear that they've been unable to continue funding it for various reasons, and the fact that a willing and desirable buyer hasn't come forward has left us in the mire, gradually getting worse over 3 seasons.
So has the problem been that Morecambe essentially overspent to get to the level that they were at in League One, and that their owners decided that they couldn't carry on spending at that level?
Yeah, I think it's a multitude of things. But yeah, spending is one of them. You'll know players' wage inflation in particular, to buy a squad that competes in normal times is very difficult. And whilst the fan base in Morecambe did grow due to our success of getting into League One, it didn't grow to the same level as our competitors, and therefore the revenue didn't match it. So we have been reliant on the owner putting money in, and that's very quickly become unsustainable for our owner.
And the owner is Jason Whittingham. So have you got, as a fan, have you got any idea of kind of the overspending relative to your income that Morecambe have been involved in?
Yeah, and I don't think it's just a Morecambe problem, this, but you can look at our accounts. I think, the last few years we've made losses of ranging from 500,000 to 1 million each season. So obviously if you're not generating that's got to come from somebody. But yeah, like I say, unfortunately the way things are, I don't think that's any different from many lower league clubs up and down the country. But broadly speaking, that's where we are. That whoever picks up Morecambe needs to make it sustainable very quickly, or they're going to have to put their hands in their pockets every year and put a deficit in. And there's not a lot of people around here can just give up £500,000 every year to make a football club run.
No, and as you may know, I support West Brom, and I'd say the average loss of a club in the Championship is around £10 million or season, give or take. So it clearly is unsustainable by any regular business standard, and it relies on sugar daddy owners putting their hands in their pockets. Losses of 500,000, 1 million in that comparison aren't very much, but if you're a local business owner losing £500,000 every year, it just can't go on. I suppose it just highlights, doesn't it, how unsustainable professional football is, or at least sustainable only if it decides to rely on these sugar daddy owners.
Yeah, there's some good examples. We were in the same league as Exeter, and they relegated us actually on the last day of the season. That was a long old drive back to Morecambe, but they've got that model of there's enough 10,000 people willing to pay a monthly subscription to keep the football club going, and it's not disparaging to Morecambe, but we don't have 10,000 fans, and actually of those 10,000, how many would be able to put 50 quid a month into a football club? We're one of the most deprived economic areas in the country, so to ask this community round here to do that doesn't seem feasible.
So Jason Whittingham decides that he can't fund the club anymore, and that's it's not, I suppose, reasonable to expect somebody to just keep putting their hand in their pocket forever and ever. Why has selling the club proved so difficult?
And I can only work off what I know, so I'm surmising this. I think he's wanting too much for it. I think he's seen it as his one chance to make good money or to clear all of his debts and his personal debts, and leave him coming out of it cushy. And I just don't think there's been the appetite for what he's expected for our football club. So League One would have been the ideal time to sell it. That would have been when he'd have got the good money. But we've slipped down to League Two. We've slipped now down to the National League. So the caliber of purchasers, shall we say, is less desirable than it was further up the league. So I'm sure he's kicking himself, going, I wish I'd taken one of the offers at that time, but he didn't. I put it down to greed, but we don't know his specific personal circumstances.
No, we do know a few things about Jason Whittingham, though, don't we?
We do.
The company's owned by the Bond Group, and he is the leader of the Bond Group. He's been a director of 25 companies during his career, according to Companies House. 18 of those 25 have either been dissolved, voluntarily dissolved, either put into administration, put into liquidation, or had the receivers sent in. 2 of his companies had been dissolved by compulsory strike-off prior to his takeover of Morecambe. And his business associate, a guy called Colin Goldring, they've both were disqualified as company directors for 12 months in 2022. Goldring has been barred by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and the 2 of them also ran Worcester Warriors Rugby Club, which is not a million miles from where I'm recording this. They went into liquidation in 2022. Now, this was before they took over Morecambe before that, of course, before the Worcester Warriors liquidation. But when you look at that very checkered business history, it does make you wonder how, given the number of flags that have been raised about different owners, how they could have passed the EFL's owners and directors test.
Yeah, and I think we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about the suitability of regulation. But, I was in a meeting with the EFL once, and they said, oh, we changed the rules now based on Whittingham and Goldring getting in, but it's kind of too late for Morecambe because they're through the door, and there was no real solace in that statement. I mean, I'm glad that they've tightened it up for the sake of other clubs, but yeah, exactly, it's quite the rap sheet, isn't it, for then a regulator to look at and go, yeah, these seem like decent guys who will do the decent thing by Morecambe FC. The regulation has tightened a little bit, but I think you and I both agree that it needs to go a lot further. And clearly there's a position where, as long as they can prove 2 years worth of source and sufficiency, they can pay the upfront payment for a club, and they've not got a criminal record, then they're going to be signed off.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how tight those regulations are when we have a new football regulator. But as somebody who's been reporting on owners of football clubs since the mid 1980s. I've heard promises of tougher regulation for, can it really be 40 years? Yeah, it really is 40 years. And these owners still somehow get through. Before this latest issue, and in fairness to Whittingham, I mean, he's taken to League One. Was he seen, were the Bond Group seen as good owners until that point, and until recent times by Morecambe fans?
Might upset people by saying this, but I think actually a lot of the plaudits were given to the board at that time, who put a 5-year plan in. They did a lot of work, and yeah, Jason was putting the money in. But I think ultimately, we had a fair wind the year that we got promoted with the COVID. So I think it's a combination of circumstance. I don't think there was a great parade, fantastic. Jason Whittingham owns our club, therefore we're going to be really sustainably successful. I think, we're fairly pragmatic people up here in Morecambe, and we knew we had a fair wind behind us for that season. And that's not to put a dampener on what happened, because it was absolutely unbelievable achievement. But no, in short, I don't think anybody up here thought, brilliant, this is it, and this is all down to this guy who's put his money in his hand in his pocket to pay us through.
Yeah,
And you just
2018 they took over, and
yeah,
you got to Wembley for the first ever time, playing Newport, beat them in
yeah,
the League Two
yeah.
player final. That's how you got into League One. So, from the outside, you might think, wow, these owners have done a fantastic job until the current situation.
But of course, during that time, there were alarm bells as well. Obviously, there was Worcester under their stewardship went down. There was a charge, a fairly innocuous charge that kind of went on our stadium at one point that we're still not sure about the legalities of it. So it's not a shiny rose tinted picture. It's oh, this is fantastic. We're playing in League One, but it's also, oh, what's going on in the background here, and what are these guys all about? And you touched on the football regulation there. Actually, it's a real balance between, this is the sale of a private company, so how much clout should the government have in dictating what happens to it, versus this is a community asset and it needs to be protected. I'm a business owner. If I came to sell my business and a government department started dictating how I was doing that, I would be furious about it. But the difference is my business isn't a community asset. And that's where the regulator has to strike that real balance of doing the best for both. And actually, a government department is probably crossing a line by dictating too much on the sale of a private company. However, it clearly needs to be more robust than it already is.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting you say that then. So as a private business owner, you understand the value of private businesses, and you're not necessarily saying it should be super tough from the government side, but maybe that's where the EFL has a role in being super tough. But the trouble is the EFL and the FA over the years haven't been, have they? I mean, as Morecambe arguably proves.
It needs to be tougher than it is, and the to be it's all about balance. Clearly, the situation at Morecambe, somebody should be able to step in and declare that Bond Group are no longer fit and proper as per the rules, and there should be a stop of, right, we're testing you every so often, and as soon as you don't meet those regulations, we start then having conversations about how you exit that business. Especially in a situation like Morecambe at the minute, there is an offer on the table. There is, agreed by the EFL, agreed by the National League, agreed by Jason, agreed by Panjab Warriors. There's just no signature. So this is a situation perhaps where somebody should be able to step in and force that over the line, especially when people aren't getting paid. 2 months up here, there's people not at the wages, and it's just a disgrace.
How confident are you that with the Panjab Warriors bid that they are people to take the club forward, that it isn't, and I make no judgment on Panjab Warriors, but that it isn't a case of out of the frying pan and into the fire?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good and valid question. And Panjab Warriors have gone through the EFL testing like everybody else, and we've been told that they've been approved, whilst we've just had a conversation about how that's perhaps not rigorous enough. So yeah, it's really difficult at this moment in time. I think Morecambe fans are just desperate for a deal to be done, because it will mean that our club can continue in the National League next season. It could well be a case of out of the frying pan into the fire, but we don't have any other viable options now. So we'll almost take the path of least resistance.
Because there have been question marks raised about them.
Yeah, you know, I can look on Companies House and we can see companies hold and who people are linked to and everything, and it doesn't always make for the most positive reading. But as chair of the trust, I can't demand that I see these people's bank statements and see where the money is and what the plans are. We have to trust the regulator. We have to trust the EFL to do their job. They've passed the Panjab Warriors, so if the deal gets done, we will deal with that situation as it arises. We may well be sat here again next year having the same conversation about somebody else. And I think that's lower league football, isn't it? It's probably every league football in this country at the minute.
If I said to you now, Tarnia, you can have a football club, but that football club must not spend money that it doesn't earn. And given that Morecambe is a relatively small club, from an impoverished town, and that would limit the development of Morecambe, unless you had an amazing crop of young players coming through, or you had a brilliant manager, so that probably your chances of getting to League One are quite small. You're not impossible, but quite small. But you had to live within your means, but that guaranteed the future of Morecambe Football Club. Would that be a fair trade-off?
And I can only answer that personally. I would much prefer to have a stable club that we know is going to be there every other Saturday that we can go and watch in the counties. My personal preference would be to have that, because I just love my football club. For me, it's not about playing, the big matches and the stadiums. I love that when it happened. I want to be a more football club that this community can be proud of. I might get accused of being small town mentality for that, but actually, what we all like as football fans is having a badge to follow and something to feel part of. So for me, if there has to be a rebuild, it's about sustainability. It's about taking our time and doing things sustainable as we can, and hopefully on a basis gradually make progress. And that progress might just be coming fourth or fifth in a league for 3 seasons in a row, but we're not spending our life going, oh my God, is the football club going to exist tomorrow? Because actually, that's been our last 3 years. Are we going to have a club? And that's just not nice. And you sometimes look at the Sunday League teams and just go, oh, at least they're playing football. At least there's a football match for us to watch. And yeah, so that's my personal opinion. I might get pelters for that, but that's how I feel about it. I just want a football club in Morecambe that we can all gather around and cheer on.
Great to speak to you, Tarnia. And as I say, as a fellow football fan, I can only wish you the best. I hope that there is a solution to your ownership issue, and that any new owners who come in only have the interests of Morecambe at heart and regard themselves as custodians of a club. A great tradition, 105 years of football in Morecambe. Yeah. So wishing you all the best, and hopefully maybe play you in the FA Cup one day. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.